Before we get into anything today, I want you to sit with a question for a moment. What if the thing you believe is working against you is not even the thing she's looking at? What if you have spent years, maybe a decade, treating your age like a handicap, like something you need to overcome or apologize for, like a number that's quietly disqualifying you before you even open your mouth? And what if that whole time the woman sitting across from you was paying attention to something else entirely? I'm not saying this to make you feel better. I'm saying it because I have had real conversations with women across many different ages and stages of life. And what they say in private is almost always different from what men assume they're thinking. Stay with me here, because some of what I'm about to share is going to feel uncomfortable before it feels true. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like people looked through you instead of at you? Have you ever had a younger woman show genuine interest and immediately told yourself she was just being polite? Have you ever felt that quiet, unnamed worry, not spoken out loud, barely even thought, that maybe you're past the point where someone could really want you? If any of that sounds familiar, I need you to stay with this video all the way through, because the thing that's actually holding you back isn't what you think it is. And once you see it, really see it, you cannot unsee it. We're going to cover several qualities today, real ones, not surface level advice. But I want to flag something now. There's a distinction coming later in this video between confidence and self-respect. Most men treat those as the same thing. They are not. And the difference between them is the difference between a man women find interesting for one evening and a man they think about for years. Keep that in the back of your mind as we go. Also, there's a story I'm going to share toward the end. A woman describing two men she'd known. One was magnetic, charming, obviously impressive. The other was quieter. Months later, she was still thinking about the second one. I'll tell you exactly why. Stay with me. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel is for men who are done with surface-level answers and ready for something real. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what we put out every week. Now let's get into it. Here is something most men get completely wrong. Most men don't struggle because they're getting older. They struggle because they start acting like they're disappearing. And those are two entirely different things. I spent time with a man in his early 50s, successful, genuinely kind, sharp in the way that only real lived experience can make someone. The kind of man younger men would actually look up to if they sat still long enough to listen. But every time he walked into a room, he moved like he was apologizing for being there. When a younger woman smiled at him, he immediately told himself she was just being polite. When someone showed real curiosity about him, he pushed it away before it could become anything. What happened slowly was this. He stopped seeing himself through his own eyes. He started seeing himself through the eyes of his own fears. And that shift is what most men miss entirely. Getting older is not what locks a man in a cage. It is the story he tells himself about getting older that builds the cage around him. Once a man begins believing he is boring, unwanted, or past his time, that belief starts bleeding into everything. It changes how he holds his body. It changes the sound of his voice. It changes his energy and even the timing of his humor. Women feel this kind of emotional shift almost immediately. Not through deliberate analysis, they simply feel it. A woman might not care at all that you are 45 instead of 35, but she will absolutely notice if you are quietly searching for permission to feel good about yourself. She will notice if you are trying too hard to prove your worth. She will notice when you are waiting for her approval before you allow yourself to feel confident. And that noticing, that feeling is what creates or kills attraction. Long before any conversation about age ever happens, this is where it starts to feel real for a lot of men. Because most of us were taught, somewhere along the way, that confidence is something you receive after someone chooses you. You get the girl, then you feel good about yourself. But that's exactly backwards. And we're going to talk about why in a moment. Also coming up, I'm going to describe a specific quality that becomes more powerful as a man ages. Most men overlook it because it doesn't sound exciting. But women consistently describe it as one of the most attractive things they've ever felt from a man. Stay with me. Presence is one of the most genuinely attractive qualities a person can carry. And it has nothing to do with how you look, how much you earn, or how many years you've lived. Presence is the ability to sit across from someone without performing the version of yourself you think they want. It's staying grounded, calm, and unhurried. Most younger men haven't figured this out yet. They're still running to earn approval, still competing, still loudly proving their importance. But something different happens to men who do the inner work as they age. They become less reactive. They stop carrying desperation in their movements. They begin to feel settled inside their own skin. Women notice that shift more than most men would ever guess. It is not because age is some automatic advantage. It is because a man who has genuinely stopped fighting himself is genuinely rare. What many women are searching for is not youth. It is the particular feeling they get when they are around a man who is no longer at war with himself. If this is connecting with you, if something in here is landing differently than what you've heard before, hit subscribe right now. I put out these conversations every week, real ones, for men who are actually paying attention. Now, here's something I've noticed over years of listening, and almost no one talks about it. Men think women want a man who has every answer, who is certain about everything, completely put together. That is only half right. And the half they get wrong is the more important half. Women are not looking for a man who has everything figured out. They are looking for a man who is genuinely okay with the things he has not figured out yet. One of those comes from performance. The other comes from deep internal security. Think about how draining it is to be around someone who constantly needs to demonstrate how smart they are, where every conversation feels like a competition, where every disagreement becomes a battle, where every story is really just a vehicle for the ego. It might seem impressive for a moment, but it drains people quickly. Now think about a man who can simply listen, who doesn't become threatened when someone holds a different opinion, who can say, that's interesting, I hadn't thought about it that way, without feeling like he's shrinking. That one quality transforms the entire atmosphere of a room. Women feel it immediately. They are not looking for a perfect man. They are looking for a man whose presence brings peace. Most people are already carrying enormous weight from work, family, old wounds that never fully healed. The world constantly demands they prove themselves. So when someone encounters a man who does not add more chaos to that, who does not require emotional management, he becomes memorable in a way he doesn't expect. I remember a woman in her 30s who had spent years dating men her own age. She described the older man she had fallen for by saying, "Every time I was around him, I felt like I could finally breathe." She did not describe his appearance. She did not mention his finances. She talked about a feeling. Attraction almost always begins as a feeling, not a calculation. I told you earlier there was a distinction coming between confidence and self-respect. This is it. Pay attention here, because this is where most men lose ground without realizing it. Confidence is largely what others observe from the outside. Self-respect is what generates that confidence from somewhere real. You can perform confidence for an evening. You can rehearse what to say, practice a relaxed posture, fool people for a while. But self-respect reveals itself in unguarded moments. It shows up in how you respond when someone tells you no. It shows up in how you carry yourself when no one is complimenting you. It shows up in how you speak about yourself when you're alone, and in how you allow people to treat you when no one is watching. This is where many men quietly lose ground as they age. Life marks all of us. Dreams don't arrive. Relationships disappoint. People leave. After enough of those experiences, many men begin unconsciously treating themselves as worth less. They lower their standards without naming what they're doing. They chase people who are only mildly interested. They bend and shape themselves into whatever they imagine the other person wants. But you cannot build real attraction by dissolving yourself. A woman might appreciate your helpfulness. She might enjoy your company. But if she senses that you're abandoning yourself to earn her approval, something will feel off. Not because she's analyzing it, because people instinctively trust someone who trusts themselves. I once listened to a woman explain why she ended things with a man she genuinely cared for. She said, "I felt like I had to tell him he was enough every single day." She did not say he was unkind. She did not say he was dull. She said his emotional survival had become her responsibility. That is one of the heaviest things a relationship can carry. And almost nothing collapses a connection faster. There's one more quality I want to talk about before we close. And I saved it for here because it's the one that sounds the least exciting on paper. But it is the one women describe most often when they talk about a man they genuinely fell for. Not just found attractive, actually fell for. Stay with me, not emotional numbness, not performing toughness, not pretending nothing hurts. Just steadiness, the ability to feel something fully without being completely governed by it. Most people are pulled dramatically in every direction by their emotions. One encouraging message and they feel invincible. One piece of criticism and the whole day collapses. Always reacting, always swinging. Being around that for long stretches becomes exhausting in a way that's hard to explain but easy to feel. What many women find genuinely compelling is not a man who never feels anything. It's a man who is not entirely at the mercy of every feeling he has. A man who can feel hurt without becoming punishing. Who can feel uncertain without unraveling. Who can feel deeply interested in someone without becoming obsessive. That creates something harder to find than most people acknowledge, a sense of safety. Not safety from external things. The specific safety of knowing that the person beside you will not fall apart every time something goes sideways. Now, the story I promised you. A woman describing two men she had known. One was magnetic, attention-filling, effortlessly charming. The other was quieter, less obvious. Months later, she was still thinking about the second one. When asked why, she said, "I always knew where I stood with him." Simple words, enormous weight. Consistency builds trust in a way nothing else can replicate. What ruins most connections is not a lack of attraction. It's the constant uncertainty of being with someone who doesn't know himself well enough to show up the same way twice. We're almost at the end. But I want to leave you with something that reframes everything we've talked about today. Because underneath almost everything men worry about when it comes to age, there is one fear they almost never name directly. The fear of being replaced, the fear of being passed over. That fear is more common than anyone admits. But here's what I've watched happen over and over again. The men who worry most about being replaced are almost always the ones who have lost track of what makes them specifically themselves. They are so consumed by comparison that they have stopped connecting. And comparison is a game with no end and no winner. There will always be someone with a younger face, more money, more followers. If your sense of value is built on being better than others, it will always be on the edge of collapse. The men who stop playing that game entirely, those are the ones who become genuinely magnetic. Not because they're trying to be, because they are present, curious, still alive in the actual sense of the word. One of the most quietly attractive things about a man is the feeling that he is still engaged with life, still learning, still moved by things, still interested. You can feel it when someone talks about something they genuinely love. Their face shifts, their voice changes, their age disappears entirely in that moment. You're not looking at their years, you're looking at their spirit. That quality compounds with time, in the men who keep tending to it. So let this be the thing you carry with you after this video ends. It is not money, appearance, or age that determines how someone feels standing next to you. It is knowing who you are. The men who struggle most are the ones trying to appear attractive. The men who draw people naturally are the ones who are simply busy being themselves. Stop asking whether you are too old. Start asking whether you have become a man you actually respect. That question leads somewhere real, somewhere age cannot touch. If this video meant something to you, subscribe. Share it with a man who needs to hear it. I put out these conversations every week for men who are done settling for surface level answers. Take care of yourself and keep growing.